Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be going over Game 5 of the World Championship match between Ian Nepomniachtchi and Magnus Carlsen. In this game, Nepomniachtchi had the white pieces and Magnus Carlsen had black. And if you want to see more content like this, if you like content like this, please hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. So the game started out with e4, e5, knight of 3, knight c6, and we start with a royal pass, which has been played already previously in this match. So then we have a6, bishop a4, and Magnus Carlsen goes in to repeat what he did previously, which is threaten to play the marshal, and Ian Nepomniachtchi feels obligated once again to play an anti-marshal system. Now, if you don't know why, you can look at my comments on the previous game explaining why people avoid the marshal. You can also just look at my entire video on if you play e4, e5, you should be playing the marshal. And I explain very clearly why allowing the marshal has been a drawing weapon. So here Ian Nepomniachtchi plays a4. Basically, there's three main anti-marshal systems in this position. There is h3, there is d4, and there is a4. But basically, any move that allows the white knight to access the c3 square could be considered an anti-marshal system. Magnus Carlsen actually himself once essayed the move a3, which does count and classifies itself as an anti-marshal. Again, it's very difficult to play the marshal when the white knight still has access to the c3 square. So basically today everybody is playing some form, some way, some kind of anti-marshal system with white. Nepomniachtchi plays a4 because he had bad luck with the h3 system in an earlier game, and then Magnus Carlsen deviates here as well, probably not liking the results he got in game 3 with the move bishop to b7, where he did achieve a draw, but the position did look very good for Nepomniachtchi. So he switched it up, and he played rook b8, so each side is going to be switching it up. So Nepomniachtchi exchanges, he plays a takes b5, a takes b5, and then Nepomniachtchi plays an interesting waiting move. He plays h3, which is of course aimed at the move bishop to g4, which black might eventually decide to play. And the idea is that if Magnus continues to keep the c3 square open for his knight, there shouldn't be any type of switching back or reverting back to some type of martial setup, which is something not only Magnus has been known to do, but it seems like he enjoys doing this kind of thing. And also, if we're going to just hunker down and play pawn to d3 and defend our e4 pawn, if that bishop develops to the long diagonal, it's going to be biting on granite. So in that sense, depending on what Nepomniachtchi plans, h3 is actually a perfectly reasonable waiting move as opposed to committing himself to either c3 or d3 right away. So then we have pawn to d6, and then Ian Nepomniachtchi says, okay, well, if you've played d6, it's not likely you're going to want a two-step d6 to d5, so I'll go ahead and play c3. Magnus gains some space with pawn to b4, and then Nepomniachtchi plays the move pawn to d3, which means that if this bishop wants to develop to the long diagonal, it's going to be biting on granite. And Nepomniachtchi just expects to enjoy a very slight advantage here after bc3, bc3, because he has a preponderance of pawns in the middle, and from all appearances, it just appears that Magnus Carlsen is going to be stuck with a passive position. But instead, Magnus Carlsen goes ahead and plays d5, and offers up a Marshall Gambit type position again, under really odd kind of conditions, under very strange circumstances. So, of course, the question that Ian Nepomniachtchi has to answer here is, can I accept this pawn here? And it's kind of hard to figure out because, yeah, white wasted a move with h3, but it's not a wasted move. It's actually kind of useful, especially against the standard martial plan. This isn't exactly a wasted tempo. And also, it seems like white has the ability to develop his pieces relatively quickly, which is usually the reason that black will avoid playing this martial gambit. So what would have happened if Ian Nepomniachtchi took the pawn? So if he had played e takes d5, knight takes d5, and then ripped this pawn, the compensation that Carlsen is going for would be something along the lines of bishop e6, and then he's putting significant pressure on both the idea of playing knight c3 with pressure on the b3 bishop. So like there's a thread of knight c3, bishop takes b3, just winning the pawn back. But also the threat of putting this bishop on the long diagonal. So Nepomniachtchi would have been forced to play bishop takes d5, and Carlsen would have had the bishop pair. He could have struck in the middle with d4, and then after, say, bishop f6, rook back, he could have just simply played something like rook a8. And in this position, the bishop pair is really, really powerful, and we're looking at something, very similar to, the very first game where Magnus Carlsen just basically had this bishop pair as compensation for his pawn, and this was more than enough, especially considering that the queen side is underdeveloped. So, I mean, in the end, the position should probably be equal, but certainly if you're Nepomniachtchi, you're going to want to get more out of this with white. So that's why after d5, Nepomniachtchi kept it nice and closed, and he actually played this move relatively instantly. So it's fairly obvious that he may have had this. I shouldn't say fairly obvious, but he may have had this prepared. He may have been expecting pawn to d5 from Magnus. So he played knight on b to d2, and then d takes e4, and then we have d takes e4, and I don't know. It seems like the position is got to be pretty close to equal, but I guess if anybody's better, maybe white's just a smidge better. It's hard to say. But it's fairly close to equal right now. So then we have Magnus just play bishop d6, just finished developing. Magnus has kind of just a few more loose pieces than white does, and white just has some slightly better diagonals and just very slightly better placed pieces for white, probably. So then we have queen c2, h6, Magnus just making slow improvements, Nepomniachtchi making slow improvements with his knight, also preparing to develop this bishop. We have knight e7, knight g3, we have knight g6, bishop e3, everybody just repositioning their pieces to better squares, rook on e to d1, bishop to e6, bishop a4, just trying to keep things interesting, because at this point the pawn structure is symmetrical and everybody's developed, so it's very hard to create anything here. The position just looks pretty much dead equal. There's just not a whole lot to write home about. So then we have bishop d7, knight d2, it's a reasonable idea, trying to redeploy the knight to the c4 square. Takes, queens come off the board, a pair of rooks come off the board, so I mean we're running out of stuff. The pawn structure is still symmetrical. Nobody seems to have won anything. Rook to b8, and each side has an open file, each side has the same number of pawns, a totally symmetrical position. Again, if anybody's better, probably white. White has slightly better access for his knights. He has the f5 square and the c4 square, but it really shouldn't be enough to win. This is just a completely equal position. But Nepomniachtchi gives it a shot. He plays rook a6, the knight goes back to e8 to defend the d6 square, and after king f1 to get his king into the middle and secure the e2 square, Nepomniachtchi starts targeting the d6 square. So he's got everything kind of lined up on d6, but black just defends d6. And this is part of the problem with any position where there just aren't enough weaknesses to attack. There's maybe one weakness in black's position, and by the way, white has the same weakness. It's a completely symmetrical pawn structure. But if you're just attacking one weakness, black can just use all of his pieces to defend that very same weakness, and absolutely nothing happens. And that's what happens here. We have f3, we have f6. Magnus is just basically preparing king f7 with continued hunkering. And there's just nothing to attack here for white. There's not a second weakness that white can poke at or try to exploit. So we have g4, king f7, h4. Black is completely safe. He can do anything. So he just retreats his bishop, putting his rook on the open file, removing that danger from the position. And then after king e2, he proceeds to play knight d6, just clearly stating his intention to just swap a bunch of stuff, call it a draw, and go home. So knight c takes, bishop takes. We have h5. Nepomniachtchi just trying to get something out of this, just gaining some space on the king side. But again, there's just nothing there. Bishop f8, opening back up that file. Just some king shuffling. The rook goes to the open file. Once the rook goes to the open file, and black has this giant access to the long side, any hope of white creating anything out of this is completely gone. The active rook will just kind of steal the deal here. After here, Magnus and Nepomniachtchi just shuffle rooks. Basically, white can't avoid shuffling in the position because he can't allow black's rook to get too active. And then in this symmetrical position, black will actually start playing for the win instead of white. So the rooks shuffle and the game ends in a threefold repetition. And we have yet another draw. And I would say that on an opening level, this was a huge success for Magnus Carlsen. Once again, it appeared like Nepomniachtchi was prepared, considering that he declined Carlsen's idea instantly. But at the same time, I'm left wondering if that's the best Ian Nepomniachtchi has, to allow Magnus Carlsen a very easy draw with the black pieces. If that was his preparation, it's not great preparation. So In this case, I feel like, whereas in previous games, I felt like a lot of times Magnus Carlsen won the surprise battle but lost the preparation battle. I feel like in this game, Magnus won both. He won the surprise battle and he won the preparation battle. Because even if Nepomniachtchi was prepared, which I'm not 100% convinced he was, it was preparation that favored Magnus Carlsen. If you're prepared for an idea like d5 with white and you're not getting an advantage, your preparation isn't very good. So here I think Magnus Carlsen is very happy he won with the black pieces. I mean, he got a draw with the black pieces, which is basically a victory. And he managed to do it very easily without a whole lot of problems. At the same time, there wasn't a whole lot of mistakes that we could point to from Nepomniachtchi. He didn't do a whole lot wrong. Just a very well-played game from both players that happened to end in a draw. So anyways, I hope you liked this video on Game 5, and I will go ahead and try to continue coverage, and I'm going to recap Game 6 and Game 7, and we're going to keep going and keep taking a look at these games. I hope that you liked this video, and I hope you learned something new about chess. Thank you for watching.